we traveled around the country partnering with independently owned gas stations, and we would use our resources to host an event for about an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. And we reduce the cost of gas from wherever it was currently to a predetermined number. It was a national average that I can't remember. I believe it was like 2020s or 2022s.
I think it was when President Biden came into office.
Yes, thank you.
That was the gas.
Yes.
When the price of a gallon of gas when he came into office.
Yes, I think, and widely enough, I can't remember that, but I'm pretty sure it was $2.39. We took everything down to $2.39. And it was really awesome because people would line up. There'd be lines of cars, and that's where we came into play. The team that I was on, we provided consistent security and logistics and management.
Yeah.
The different state teams would come in and they'd support us with volunteers, handing out flyers, or just meeting and greeting with people.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. So we've been talking about Americans for Prosperity's One Small Step campaign for a number of months now. Hopefully you've caught some of the episodes, but in its essence, it's about everyday people, everyday Americans taking a step to get involved, to change their community, their state, their nation. And it's really the story of our founding and the history of America. Individuals taking that step to get involved and make a difference. So we have a great opportunity here. We're at Americans for Prosperity's all-staff meeting where our staff from around the country come together once a year to talk about our priorities, to get motivated, talk about our strategies to make America better, to increase freedom and liberty for all Americans. And so I'm super excited because we have all these individuals here who have dedicated their lives to advancing freedom and liberty. They've taken not only one small step to get involved, but additional steps to really make it their life's work. And some of them are just really wonderful stories. And we've been happy to try to tell some of those stories. So I'm really excited for Greg Dowell to join us. He originally from Tennessee, works on our federal affairs team, and has a story that starts out, from almost a traditional way, not unlike me. You go to college and get involved, but all of us have that story of like how we actually kind of move into that larger way that we contribute to making a difference, hopefully in the nation. So, Greg, thanks so much for joining us. I'm really interested to hear your story, and glad that we can be together.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's always fun to be a part of American Potential Podcast.
Nice.
Yeah. So as you said, pretty standard, traditional small town boy, came from Carthage, Tennessee. Mom and dad are both educators, now retired, but at the time were educators. And so if you haven't grown up in a small town, it is a microcosm of all the things of a big city. And they definitely taught me a lot about the world and the people around me.
How small is it?
So Carthage, in the 2010 census, and I should really get these numbers updated, but in 2010, it was 2,500. The county as a whole was 20,000.
Oh, wow.
And I throw that number out a couple of times working in Washington, D.C., and people will look at me and say, "You're joking, right?" And I was like, no, there were 2 high schools, and I graduated from the larger one, and my class was 164 people. And they say we had 10 high schools, and that was the smallest high school's graduating class. I had one person be like, "I had more people in my block than you did in your city." And I said, well, let me really throw you a curveball. Technically, I grew up in an area called Tanglewood that was unincorporated.
Yeah.
Carthage is just the closest town. And they're like, "I don't understand what unincorporated is." I said, "Don't worry about it. We're getting too small for you." But no, it was a great place to grow up. The people were very kind, and I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about the world. Like I said, my mom and dad were teachers, very engaged in the community, both from work, from their volunteering, from church, just being pillars of the community. We were very well known, blessed to have that scrutiny, maybe. I mean, it's a small town. Everybody knows everything about everything. But that was really where through watching my parents always put others first and caring about others and working with people, was kind of the beginning and the inception of my drive for being a people person. Learning about people's stories and what makes them tick and what motivates them. Because as a young age, I decided a life motto for me would be that there is one unique thing that everyone can teach me. It's just my job to listen and ask the right questions to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
And so I just got enamored with the idea of talking to people, working with people, volunteering with people, expanding my horizons. I did everything from band and football, French, Interact, 4-H. I did a jazz band. I did church choir. I was a camp counselor in Arkansas, and took that and had the opportunity to go to college and jumped on that. I ended up going to the University of Tennessee. Go Vols. We are obviously the volunteer state. So again, the whole state is kind of bought into the idea of being there for people, and the university as a whole. It is our mascot after all. But so got into Tennessee, dove headfirst into my programs, was a part of student government. I actually was part of a select group within the student government that was the government affairs committee. And so it was our job to represent the university at the state legislature. So for 4 years I would go, and we called it lobbying, but really it was us telling our stories and telling the stories of our peers, be it kids like me coming from a small town, be it kids that were coming from big cities like Brentwood or Franklin or Nashville, Memphis, or it was the kids that were coming in on scholarship and the first to come to college for their family, making ends meet, figuring it out, and trying to elevate their experience and make something of themselves and make the best better, to steal a line from 4-H that I still love to use.
Well, I wonder, I imagine that a lot of the students going and doing that, and maybe it was true for you, this was the first time that they had to talk to an elected official and kind of petition them and make their voice heard and try to, ask them to do something.
100% correct. And, there was interest from a lot of us, but no, we'd not had the opportunity. And it was a great chance for that specific committee. You had individuals from all of the grades, including grad school students. So there were some that had more experience, but they had learned in their previous years. And so it was really great to really engage in the democratic process and, talk to the legislators and do what our founding fathers wanted us to do, which was be engaged in this thing called politics that's running our country and making us the greatest thing out there. So no, it was a great opportunity. And truth be told, I quickly learned that the legislators loved that. I mean, they'll love it. They're very happy to work with a lobbyist and it's in-house and that's being paid. But to hear the real life stories, it just brings it home and it makes it more real for them.
So were your parents at all political? Did they get involved at all, or was this like a whole new deal for you?
This was very new for me. I had some family that was engaged with it, but mom and dad, like I said, they were teachers. Yeah. Dad was the high school band director and then became principal. Mom, for all of my childhood, was a general music teacher. So it was very much, again, tropes of small towns, everything's political. But in terms of actually running for office or being a campaigner or a fundraiser or anything like that, absolutely not. Yeah. So it was a very, very high learning curve, but I had some really good teachers, which was great.
So what kind of took you in your next step in getting involved in a career in politics? Absolutely.
This was one of my favorite things. And I learned about it through those once a year trips to Nashville to lobby the legislature. How the Tennessee legislature works and operates for probably about 50 years now. They started an internship program, and it's a paid internship program to bring students from across the state that are in political science or pre-law or any of history courses to come and get their hands in the meat of the legislature, supporting committees and different members. So I worked with the political science department at Tennessee, Go Vols, and we got me a political science minor that set me up to be eligible. I interviewed and applied, had to drive to Nashville and sit before a panel of college professors from across the state. And I was fortunate enough to support the Health and Welfare Committee. So fell in love with health policy. That was, unbeknownst to me, something that was going to follow me throughout my career. But I did the semester there, had a great time working for the committee. That turned into a summer internship with the Department of Treasury. And then I had to go back to school. Probably one of the most difficult things was going back to school after having an adult job.
Yep.
But I did the last year. My advisor said, I need you to write one more paper. And I said, but it's a 45-page paper. I really don't want to. And she's like, yeah, but you can do it. And I said, what about 45 bullet points? And she's like, nope, that's not how this works. 45-minute speech? Nope, that's not how this works. I said, okay. She's like, I need you to do a culmination of all the things that we've been teaching you and put it into the real world. And I said, okay, deal. So I went back, did another year. It was great because now I'm the senior. I've now worked and I got to mentor a lot of those freshmen and sophomores that were coming with me to lobby the Hill that following spring. So it was great, pay it forward moment, and ended up graduating, and I knew I wanted to come to DC. So I interviewed with a variety of the different Tennessee delegates. Very fortunate that I got to work for a woman named Diane Black.
Oh,
she was my member of Congress, which made it especially special.
Oh yeah. I have worked for my own member of Congress, and it's super cool because you learn about like your cities and different people pop up. You're like, oh, I know that person. Right. And it I've always thought a congressman is kind of it's like a really grown up alderman, or
Yes.
it's like a really important alderman who has federal responsibility, but they're still in that. They're not all the way only federal, national, everything. They still care a lot about, well, at least the good ones.
Yes.
A lot about local and state issues, especially local. And, the best ones really are so connected to folks in their districts and the issues facing their districts. I worked for one very successful congressman in a swing district who's always challenged, in this case by the Democrats, and would almost lose, but would pull it out. And his strategy is he would take state issues, or I'm sorry, local issues, and figure out how to get a national hook in them, like funding or it's a messaging thing, or bring, it was about like drugs in schools. He'd bring in, like, we did a screening for kids of all of, like, this is your brain on drugs. This is, and like, tell us what you think about these different ads and stuff. It was just to connect, and anyway, I'm sorry for ranting on, like, I do think congressmen are really interesting. Those offices are so fascinating because there's such a local element, and yet there's the State of the Union. There's, declaring war. There's a lot of really, really important stuff on the federal level too.
No, 100%. And that was another reason why I ultimately decided to work with her. I had a couple of offers, but she was an ER nurse by training.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so it was something that, as a people person, as somebody who wanted to be in Congress to help people, I thought there's no one better than a nurse. She understood it. She wanted to be connected. She wanted to, the best times that I had working with her were actually when we'd go back to the district together, and I would help get her around, do the events. I was her director of operations, so I just run her life for her. And I was very grateful that she trusted me, which, takes a lot of trust as you're giving your life away to a mid-20-year-old that just graduated from college. But no, it was a great time. And again, with her being a nurse, well-rooted in healthcare policy.
Yeah.
The addition that got pulled in for me was she was also on Ways and Means. And so that is, of course, one of the most important. It's the only committee in the House that's recognized in the Constitution. And so that helped me understand more about tax policy and finance. And it has its hands pretty much everywhere in commerce, labor, et cetera. And unbeknownst to me, that too was going to continue to follow me as I've come here to work for Americans for Prosperity. And so worked with her for 6 years. She ended up retiring. So I, regretfully had to help her shut down the office, but we passed the torch to a new member, and he's doing a great job with his team. And I had to go find a job. And so I was like, well, what am I going to go do? And I'd heard some things about some nonprofits. I knew, the spirit behind nonprofits is right in alignment with what I wanted to do. And I found my way to a small special interest group and got to work there and really earn my chops because it was small. There was a lot of space for me to grow, learn, and learn some skills. Found myself after a couple of years, we got through COVID, and I felt like I'd outgrown or hit my, my top. And so I took a break and enters AFP. very fortunate to have followed AFP for years. Tennessee has a great chapter, and so we had been involved and engaged with them from the congressman's office. But then I also had some friends at the national level working here in HQ and in the DC office, and they introduced me to the Washington's inflation awareness campaign called The True Cost of Washington. And it was a really cool experience for me. I had not traveled a lot in our country. Good old Southern boy, I stayed in the South. DC was a big change for me after leaving Knoxville, and had not gotten very far west. And this was an opportunity for me to cross the Mississippi. But it was an amazing summer. Some of my best friends that still work with AFP, I made on that trip.
So what were you guys, take us through what you did on the True Cost of Washington.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is I'd already fallen in love with AFP, and this made me understand why they have the magic sauce. They're not just a think tank, we're a do tank. And so we put our money where our mouth is. We put our people what we believe in. And so we traveled around the country partnering with independently owned gas stations, and we would use our resources to host an event for about an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, and we would reduce the cost of gas from wherever it was currently to a predetermined number. It was a national average that I can't remember. I believe it was like 2020s or 2022s.
I think it was when President Biden came into office.
Yes, thank you.
That was the gas.
Yes.
When the price of a gallon of gas when he came into office.
Yes. I think, and widely enough, I can't remember that, but pretty sure it was $2.39. We took everything down to $2.39. And it was really awesome because people would line up. There'd be lines of cars, and that's where we came into play. The team that I was on, we provided consistent security and logistics and management. The different state teams would come in and they'd support us with volunteers, handing out flyers or just meeting and greeting with people. But our team was in charge of making sure that the event happened.
Well, I've done a number of those events in the past. One also, we used to do them years ago when President Obama was in office even. But this was like a first time we did a systemic across the country. And I think we really professionalized it. You're a big part of that. But there's such great events because you really see people who are, unfortunately, you see people who are struggling.
Yeah.
Folks who, when gas is $1 more than it used to be, have to make decisions literally between getting to work to earn any money and like eating or, getting clothes or something. And you're like, is that really hyperbole? No, there's people there who will sit in line for 2 hours, because this is it's really important that they're going to save $10 on their gas when they fill up. And it's, so to be able to have those conversations with people at the pump in this case, and be able to help educate them as to why gas is so expensive and, that this was often a government created phenomena and how it's impacting their lives. But then to benefit from the stories that people are telling us, like, it's like, we feel like we're spreading the word. The reality is like so often they're giving us that, a part of themselves and sharing their stories, which not only motivates us, but gives us those real authentic stories to go back to decision makers and say, hey, I talked to, Jenny at this gas pump and she doesn't know if her, if she's skipping lunch because she's got to put gas in the car.
No, nail on the head. As I was reflecting, in advance of this conversation, I was reflecting on some of the stories that I heard, and there were so many great stories from people, just real Americans doing their best to live their lives, to make a difference, to support their families. And, if you don't mind, I'd love to share a couple.
Please do. I want to hear the highlights. Yeah.
So I believe it was in Michigan. We had a grandmother with the granddaughter come in to get the gas. And, obviously I'd been a camp counselor, so I was kind of entertaining the kid while they'd been waiting in line and we're finally getting to pump gas. And grandmother pulled me aside and she's like, I'm so appreciative of this. We got a notice from our landlords that because of this, that, or the other, HVAC was going up. And so they were going to have to raise rent to do a building update on the HVAC. And I didn't know how I was going to afford it. And this is not going to fix everything, but it's such a small help.
Wow.
We were out in Colorado And it was, by that time, it was the beginning of school year for college kids. And there was a husband and wife who had just dropped their daughter off at one of the universities in Colorado, and they were driving back to Texas. And they said, we would not have, like, we were going to have trouble paying for the gas to get home, but we knew we needed to get her here with the trailer, with the clothes, with all the furniture and stuff. Just like, this is setting us up for success for our like 16-hour drive home. There were so many great stories from farmers, small business owners, the electricians, the welders, the cafeteria ladies, just trying to go and do what they wanted to do, what they loved, and giving back in their own ways. And it was very eye-opening that sometimes decisions in DC that you don't think about, because it's like, well, we need to do this. We don't think about how it trickles down or how it affects the normal person. And because there's so many levers and pieces that go into the machine, but at the same point, like, we end up hurting people and putting a lot of burden on the everyday American. That's just not really fair.
Yeah. I mean, look, so often the decisions that get made in Washington or state capitals, even village halls, don't take into consideration real life impacts. They're driven by a special interest, or they're driven by an agenda. And, I feel like if folks really could listen to how things are impacting the taxpayers and everyday people, it makes a real difference. I think it's one of the real strengths when AFP is at its best is that we aggregate those voices to make them louder than the special interest, hopefully, or that local mayor or whoever it is, to say, hey, this is, this is really making a difference in people's lives, or this is really hurting people. Because the people who are hurt the most are the people who have the least margin, which are folks who make less money. They're poorer. They have less advantages. Yeah. And those are the working folks who just really get hurt. And I think, like, so often we want to give voice to folks who feel like they don't have time to go and make their voice heard, or show up in an office or something like that, because they're working 2 jobs and they're working hard, and they got to spend all their time to make their family work and make ends meet. So I'm glad that you're able to kind of gather a lot of those stories. And then I know that we kind of amplified those as part of that effort. I also think that the True Cost, in which you're involved in, was a really great example of what makes Americans for Prosperity unique, because we run ads, we have mail, we lobby, we do all the things that advocacy groups do, but we also really believe in our core and grassroots. And sometimes that's people going knocking on doors and making phone calls, have conversations. But a lot of times it's also event driven stuff where we're gathering people together and trying to, either put on a show to send the message, or, get people involved to then hopefully put them through the system to kind of go be advocates themselves.
No, absolutely. That is one of my favorite things that I've been able to do. I've done some door knocking before. We've hosted events in the States. We've hosted events in DC. In addition to all staff, where we all get to come together and re-energize ourselves. One of the things that we do in DC with the government affairs team is we do a thing called Capitol Conference. Yeah. And that's where we bring all of our state teams up to DC, and we're really excited because they come with their stories from their door knocking, their events, their grassroots, and we help catapult them into Capitol Hill so that they have the meetings with the members, the staff, and the decision makers to help bring that life back to and that realism back to Congress, and letting them know, like, hey, this is how this is impacting. This is what your people really care about. And not to say that, having worked on an office, I know there's a lot of effort and energy put by good members to be connected, but it's all about, and this is what I think you're getting at, and I share the same perspective, giving people a space and a place to have their voice heard so that they actually understand, like, they are a part. That was one of the biggest things from the True Cost that I took away. So many people felt like they had no power and they had no opportunity to say anything. And so with AFP coming in and actually saying, no, we want to hear from you, I think, again, is what makes it such a special place. Yeah.
So your career then takes a turn. You're working for AFP, but now you moved over to our federal affairs team. And, folks might not know this, but, we have a whole, we call it our Freedom Embassy, right on Capitol Hill. It's a great office space, the number of floors, and our staff from our government affairs teams, and right there on Capitol Hill. And, I've we've been fortunate to work out of there and get to know one another there. But tell us, how do you feel about this next chapter of like trying to make a difference on Capitol Hill?
And it is a very exciting time. We've been in the space about 2-3 years. We're getting our stride. We've expanded our access in the space, and we're innovating the resources that we have in it.
Putting in a podcast. So we're very excited to broadcast.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. But no, I mean, innovating the space, innovating the events. We've had some really great opportunities to have off the record conversations, host reporters to, share media insights. We've brought, like I said, we've brought grassroots in. We've brought in our volunteers, not just our state team. We've actually brought in some of our individual.
Well, sometimes to meet with like Speaker Mike Johnson or the majority whip or majority leader Steve Scalise. I mean, we had all the leadership from Congress came and spoke at the Freedom Embassy. I'm sure that was a stressful time for you, but we brought our activists and state teams in so that they could connect that. The Americans for Prosperity is an organization that's state-based, but very, but very impactful and cares a lot about the national policy. So, we'll meet with you in your DC office, and then we'll meet with you in your district office, and then you'll see us at events across your district. You can't hide.
You're going to know us.
Yeah.
That's the great thing, because we're good people. We're fun.
As long as you're doing the right thing.
True. But no, Freedom Embassy. We're really excited to continue driving the American voice in Washington, D.C. We are one of the closest organizational groups to Capitol Hill. We're very blessed to be just right by the buildings, which just puts us, members want to come by. They want to see us. Their staff want to come by.
Convenience matters.
Convenience does
and
matter.
Actually being effective. So you put those together, hopefully we get a...
Yeah, there's a great Venn diagram there. But no, it's one of those things. I don't know what I don't know. And so there's just a world of opportunities with the space. And we're really looking forward to seeing all the things that can happen. But like you said, we've hosted some great events so far, and I can't imagine anything but good things in the future.
Nice. So just as we wrap up, what would you say to folks, someone's from a small town or, they're from a household where parents weren't involved in politics, which is also what I was from, but then they think like, he sounds kind of interesting to me. What would you say to somebody, a young person like that, or even someone who moved on in their career a little more and is like, I like public policy. I would like to make a difference. What would you say to them? Any advice that you give them?
Coming from a small town, this is one of the things that I do feel very important about when I go back home and I see people from my town and they're like, I can't believe you're in DC. It's such a big city. And sure, yeah, by square footage, by population, it's a big city. But there's still people in that city, just like there's people in my hometown, and they're out there being kind and good. You just got to find it. And so I like to joke, it's like, you just got to find the small town in the big city. And that's, if you continue to be authentic and open and, your true self and trying to connect with others, you're going to find your people.
You attract them.
Yeah.
When you kind of give off that energy, not to be metaphysical, but you do, you're kind to others and people are attracted to that, and you attract hopefully good people as your community then.
Exactly. And, you're going to find that community, and it's going to make that big city much more like a small town, like home, like you're looking for.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, I can't wait to see you again when I come over to the Freedom Embassy, and I appreciate
Come on down.
sharing your story with us and all the work you've been doing.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks. And I hope all staff's great.
Yes.
Hey, folks. If you like this episode, feel free to follow us on social media at either Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And always remember, freedom and liberty are easily taken for granted. Don't take them for granted. Go out there and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.